Hi, this is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz from Israel 365 News, coming at you live from the Golan, where all the fun is. And today we're very pleased to have with us a dear friend, Yael Eckstein. She is now running she's the director of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. She took over the function from her Abba of blessed memory, Rabbi Yechiel Eckstein, who passed away 2 years ago. The fellowship is actually a huge support of Israel. It brings Christian help to Israel, hundreds of millions of dollars to bring Jews from places that they're in danger. They bring Russian Jews over on the Wings of Israel program. They brought hundreds of thousands of Jews to Israel from Ethiopia, Argentina, and other distressed countries. So Yael is with us. She's been filling her Abba's shoes for 2 years now. I was merited to speak to your father, to interview him a few times. And first of all, he was, there's a lot of focus on him being charismatic and really a high power individual. I also want to emphasize he was so sweet. He was so sweet to me. He was a very sweet man. He asked me a lot about my being an Abba. I was so touched. But the main thing that I think people miss about the fellowship is he was really using it as an excuse to connect people. The main thing was not the money. And that's a message that I get very clearly every time I speak to you. Would you say that is the mission? And has that mission changed over the years?
Okay, wow. Well, thank you, Eliyahu. I'm so happy to be here with you and be a little bit connected to the Golan Heights. I'm on the other side of the country, but happy to be connected and happy to be with Israel 365 News once again. It has been, I always say that my life has transformed into everything I never dreamed of. I never thought I would live in Israel. I never thought I would be connected to the fellowship at all. It happened really just once I saw the work of the fellowship and spoke to and met these amazing Christians who stand with Israel and saw the biblical prophecy coming to fruition. I said, I have to be part of this. But it was never my goal in life. And definitely now I never intended or wanted even to take over the fellowship. I wanted to stand at my father's feet, continuing to learn from him and watch him lead. But I guess after 15 years of working together, God believed that I had enough experience and I've soaked up enough of his wisdom to do it on my own. So the fellowship, it's really amazing. It's really amazing how the fellowship has grown in the past year, and it's by continuing our mission. It's specifically, I'm just turning this off. I think there might be some background noise. I'm turning off my AC. It's specifically in staying with the mission that isn't, the goal isn't how many dollars we raise. It's not even how many people we help. The goal is how much can we further connecting Christians and Jews in shared values, in a love for Israel, in growth, in communication, in strategic partnership. And what's so awesome is that I always say, Eliyahu, that you know that something's true if it's based in paradox. And so the more that we focus on this bridge building connection, the more that we actually see the funds grow and the more people that we're able to help.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. Your Abba started the fellowship in 1983, which back then people don't understand. After the Trump administration, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, evangelicals and in Israel," but back in 1983, no one was talking about connecting between Israel. He was between Israel and the evangelical Christians. It was really trailblazing. Have you seen this continue? Has it changed?
I always look at Jewish-Christian relations from modern history in 3 stages. The first stage was when my father said he felt like Christopher Columbus discovering America, when he finally met for the first time Christians who love Israel, when he met these leading pastors like Pat Robertson and Pat Boone and Jack Hayford, and they all said, we love Israel, we pray for Israel. And he couldn't believe it. He never saw anything like that. He never heard anything like that. And in his head, it was so obvious God wants us to stand together. How are we in these modern times when Christians are standing with Israel and praying for Israel. How are we not doing that together? And so the first stage was really my father as a lone wolf going and telling the Jewish community, wake up, we're not alone. We should still have our red lines. We should always be alert and aware. But we have friends. For the first time, we have friends. Let's invest in this. And people thought he was crazy. And he was completely ostracized from the Jewish community and kicked out of his Bible study class. And he wasn't allowed to go up to the Torah on the Sabbath in order to read from it. He was completely ostracized. And that's the first stage, just of my father kind of planting the seed. The second stage was when the fellowship transformed into a fundraising organization. And it's funny because it wasn't us going to the Christians saying, give us money to help biblical prophecy come to fruition, but it was the other way around. It was the Christian community saying, we want to help Jews return on wings of eagles. We want to help the Holocaust survivors. We want to provide food for the hungry, clothing for the naked, and shelter for the homeless. And it was then that my father came to the Jewish community and said, look, they want to help us. Here's money for our community to help the Russian Jews go home to Israel. And that's what I really consider the second stage, when the Jewish community started really recognizing that this was something long-term, that also they could benefit from, and also that the Christian community was reaching out their hands in tangible ways to help. And I think the third stage is when President Trump moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, that suddenly the Jewish community realized the power, not just in humanitarian aid, but in political ways, in tourism, in every way of how the Christian community that numbers 800 million across the world compared to 14 million Jews, how they can be such strong strategic friends and partners for Israel and the Jewish people.
So I like to stay in the positive, but since you touched on it, one of the major steps in this relationship is on one hand, you have the very enthusiastic, very positive Christian side of it. But your father was ostracized. And I have to point out, your father was, for despite being a trailblazer in this regard, he was pretty mainstream religiously. He was not strange. I mean, I wear a strange kippah, but it's more because of my receding hairline. But other than that, I'm also fairly mainstream. And as much as I know you also seem fairly mainstream. But in this one regard, he was a trailblazer, and he was ostracized by the Jews. I think a lot of the effort has to be in getting Jews to open up the doors spiritually, socially, and also politically. Do you find this to be the case, that Jews are very reluctant to receive friendship and to engage?
I think that there are a lot of things that are very always with trailblazing. Whenever we embark in new territory, there are lots of different things that we have to ask ourselves for the first time. And so the Jewish community, what's protected the Jewish community for thousands of years, was having their guards up, having their barriers, saying we can't rely on anyone but ourselves. This is the first time that the Jewish community has friends. And understandably, it took a long time and a lot of continuation of this friendship, showing that they're not going anywhere, the Christian community, until the Jewish community finally said, okay, we understand these are new times. I always say that it's very important for the Jewish community to keep up those red lines, to keep up those barriers, while still being open to accept friendship. And I think that the Jewish community now understands exactly who we're dealing with, and exactly the fact that both from a spiritual as well as a physical standpoint, it's good for us. You see Christians helping Jews come on Aliyah. It's Christians who, during the Corona pandemic, the fellowship has brought Aliyah flights every single day.
No.
Rescuing Jews. In the first closure, when everyone was at home and no one was allowed to leave during the first coronavirus pandemic closure in Israel, the fellowship in that 6-week time brought 30,000 elderly in Israel food by working with the army to pack the food boxes, and working with volunteers who were approved by the government to go and distribute it, and leaving the food by the elderly's door. 30,000 elderly received food during a closure when 10 people weren't allowed to gather together. That I think what the Jewish community is seeing, because of this deep dedication, authentic love, and really standoffish type of nature of our evangelical friends, that they're not trying to change anything. They're not trying to push anything. They simply want to help, along with the professionalism and strategic importance of the fellowship in the humanitarian and Aliyah world. I think the Jewish community is really understanding just how critical this support is.
Yael, can you tell us a little bit more? You mentioned red lines. What red lines are you referring to when you speak about red lines?
Hi, Josh.
Hi. Sorry to just pop in there, but
it's great. I think that the Jewish community has always said our red lines is that we will not allow anybody to come and try to change us, to come and convert us. Everyone has their own red lines, and there's no very clear understanding amongst all communities of what those red lines are. Some rabbis will go and speak in a church while others won't. Some pastors will come and speak in a synagogue, while some synagogues will allow that, others won't. Some want to have open dialogue about spiritual issues, while others feel like we should deal with more of the tangible politics and other issues. That I think everyone really needs to draw their own red lines. And I'm saying as a general statement, it's healthy for the Jewish community to have red lines, everyone in their own. The ultimate red line, obviously, is anyone coming and trying to change us. And that's what my father really started the fellowship for. We are Jewish, you are Christian. As Christians believe from the Christian Bible, they are grafted onto the rich olive tree of Israel. So let's use this relationship to really learn more. Christians want to know how Jesus lived, how he kept the Sabbath, what it looked like on Passover. What does the Passover lamb mean? Where did these teachings come from of love your neighbor like yourself? That the Jewish people have carried on these traditions directly from Jesus that have been largely lost in Christianity, that there is so much to gain from one another. Yet I think any people, any community, just like families have their own red lines of what you let into your house or not, whether it's media or music or people, as a nation, because of our survival, we have to do the same.
But the Jewish people's standoffish policies when it's come to Christian and Jewish dialogue throughout the centuries is definitely it's understood. We can understand that there has been a tragic. We're not ignoring the fact that there's been a tragic history between these two religions, and the fact that even if we're going to have dialogue, there is always that suspicion that there are ulterior motives involved in when a Christian comes and willingly wants to give funds and wants to move Jews to Israel. Perhaps they have something else in mind besides just being kind. Do you address that?
I'll tell you how I understand it. And it goes back to what are the reasons that Christians want to support Israel? What are the reasons that Christians want to help Jews make Aliyah from all four corners of the earth in gathering? And I think it comes down to two main facts. The first fact is Genesis 12:3. It's one of the only times that God makes a promise. I will bless those who bless Israel. And when it comes to feeding Holocaust survivors or helping orphans, it goes back to Genesis 12:3 that the Christians that I work with always say, this is my opportunity to tap into God's blessing. I'm not trying to understand it. I'm not trying to say, are Jews better? Are they worse? But there is a statement in the Bible, Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless Israel. If you believe in that, then you want to tap into it. And the second reason is because we are living in awesome times. And sometimes I feel like Christians realize that more than the Jews, that for us, we were raised, at least I was, that of course there's Israel. In my whole life, there's been Israel. I was born after the 1967 war even. My whole life, there's been Jerusalem. There's been the Golan Heights. That it's hard to relate to something, even if you know in your head, it's hard to relate to it in your heart. And so I am raised with, of course, there's Israel. The Christians look at it and they realize kind of the reality of it, that for 2,000 years, the Jewish people were in exile. And suddenly they're returned with their homeland. Suddenly they're returned with their language. It's never happened in history to any other people before, let alone such a tiny nation. And the fact that this is happening exactly as the prophets foretold thousands of years ago, as Christians, they want to be part of it. So when you talk about something that's kind of a hot topic and an important topic it's very easy for the Jewish community to simplify. The Christian community wants to give to Israel because they want to convert us. What I would say is that's not a thought. You could sit down and have a conversation with a Christian, and they're Christian. They believe, obviously, that what they believe is true, and it should be that way. Judaism isn't a religion that wants to conquer and take over and change people to convert. They believe what they believe is true. But the reason why they sponsor so many programs for the Jewish people is in no way because they want to change us or convert us. It's because they want to be part of biblical prophecy unfolding.
How do we get that message to the Jews is the question.
We're trying.
The non-Jews already got it. How do we get it to the Jews?
Right, Josh, it's so true that I connect to Christians and they speak about prophecy. They speak about the, blessing us, being blessed. What you're doing is really a paradigm shift. It's a new paradigm because until now, as you said, there's been a history of relationships between Jews and Christians with them trying to convert us. And many Jews are still stuck in that paradigm where they think that that's the only relationship that there can be, only meaningful, significant relationship there can be between Jews and Christians is with one trying to convert the other. And even, I have to say that there's even a belief amongst religious Jews that, they're wrong, so we have to change them. And I personally try to put that on the side. I realize it's inside of me and I try to put it aside. At the same time, what you're doing is absolutely 100% not interfaith. Interfaith, as I saw it, interfaith as I experienced it in America was, we're all the same. We're all the same.
The washing machine model.
Yeah, right. And I see as one of the inevitable outcomes of a meaningful relationship between devout Christians and devout Jews is that they come out more themselves.
Yes.
Christians come out more devout, more closely connected to their belief, and I come out, and even I know sometimes they start talking about the Jewish people, and I feel like, you don't know me, I'm a schlepper, and they make me want to up my game so that I'll be living up to their expectations. So there's definitely that.
Well, it reminds me of what Shlomo Carlebach used to say. He used to say, what does it mean to be the chosen nation? It means that God chose the Jewish people to tell the world that they're chosen. And so I think that we kind of have been entrusted by God to tell the world, God loves you. And in this world where most of the world is monotheistic, you really understand what that means. That you go back to Abraham in a world of idol worshipers, who was the first monotheistic person to recognize this reality of one God. And then you look to where we came to today, that Christians believe in one God. Islam even is based on one God. And you realize that we have a mission here, as Rav Shlomo Carlebach says, to tell the world that they're chosen.
I have another question. We were going through very powerful times where things are changing from one end to the other. The relation, and most especially the relations between America and Israel, have been very much the focus. I got the feeling since Trump's star started to drop a couple months ago, that after years of the Christians supporting us and showering us with affection, that all of a sudden they need us to help them through what for many of them is a difficult time. And I get the feeling that it's now time for us to be a light to them and to help them through these difficult times. Would you say that that's accurate? Am I making things up?
Well, we don't, as the fellowship and as me personally, we don't take any stance on any politics or policies. And the reason why is because that's what holds us together, is that we focus on one thing: Jewish-Christian relations and support for Israel. Once you get into politics, you're divided. Once you say who's better or worse, you're dividing. And so what I could say is that I really believe that everything is from God. We saw some awesome things happen under President Trump. It was things happened that we didn't think would happen in 20 years happened in the span of 4 years.
Well, the first time I ever actually met you was at the U.S. Embassy's barbecue, which was like, and everyone was saying next year in Jerusalem, because it was just, that was where we were going. So rather than make it political, let's say there are people going through a difficult time right now. Can you see us returning the favor by really being a light unto them in what might be dark times?
I think that's always the role of all people of faith. What does it mean to find faith? It means that you've tapped into the goodness of God, that you found the way to bring more love into the world. We are created in the image of God. And in Judaism, just as in Christianity, one of the main principles of our faith is to love our God and to love each other. That I think, as people of faith, should bring us to do good, to spread light, to not worry ourselves over things that we can't control, like who's the president and what their policies are going to be. That, of course, it's our obligation to vote and do everything in our power in order to influence what we think is right. But that's not where most of us are going to make the biggest change. The places that most of us are going to make the biggest change is by loving our neighbor. I always say, what is it about a neighbor that we have to love? A neighbor specifically is usually not like us, doesn't raise their family like us, doesn't have the same religion as us, doesn't have the same background as us. And it's a very close, intimate relationship with the neighbor. You share the same fence, you see what each other are doing in your yards, that it's specifically there within the differences that we're commanded to love. And I think that's very much what you're saying, Eliyahu, is specifically in the dark times, we have an option. We can be dragged down into the mud and we can become negative people. And we can start talking to everyone about how horrible everything is and how horrible this is and how horrible that is and how they wronged us and how they're wronging America and how they're wronging Israel and how they are corrupt and how they are dishonest. Or we can take the little bit of light that is always there. There is never a situation that there isn't light. We just have to decide what we look at. And as people of faith, I would hope that all of us go around spreading the good things that happen instead of dwelling on the bad.
There are currently approximately 6 million Jews left in the United States, the largest Jewish population in the diaspora today. And those are the ones which are closest to home for me, because I run an organization called Bring Them Home that's involved in trying to educate and inform Jews around the world of the importance of moving back home to their ancestral homeland today. How do we convince that? You spoke about Israel being a refuge. First of all, I think it's clear today more than ever before. A year ago, almost to today, the gates of Israel were closed to tourists. As of a couple weeks ago, even to Israelis and to new immigrants, the gates are closed. I think these are clear signs from heaven that Israel may not always be available as a place of refuge for the Jews. How can we help get the Jews that are in the United States, the largest Jewish population, back home?
If I can qualify that question or add a little more, up until the fellowship was formed, 100% of the focus of Jewish assets or assets from the Jewish world were focused inside. We're focused on strengthening the Jews in their Judaism and their connection to Israel. And I think maybe the fellowship was the first major effort to bring the focus from outside, and in a process that wasn't entirely internal. So when I say that the fellowship was trailblazing, it was in precisely that. Rather than just be like, let's bring all the Jews over. It was like, yes, let's bring Jews over, but we're going to include another element in the process. So I'm sorry. So what was the question, Josh?
My question is about how we're going to bring American Jewry back home.
Right. Yeah.
So the fellowship focuses at-risk countries. We focus specifically in Ukraine, in Russia, in the Arab world, in South America. In the past few years, we've actually determined that France is now considered an at-risk country, considering there's so much anti-Semitism that Jews can't wear a Star of David necklace without threatening to be attacked. Our philosophy is that the Jews in America are wealthy enough, thank God, the wealthiest Jewish community maybe in the history of the exile, that if they want to come home from Israel, not that everyone's wealthy, but that the Jewish community is able to support bringing them home to Israel. Our philosophy is specifically that where the fellowship is needed, that again, our donations are from sacrificial giving. Our average gift is $65 a month. And from $65 a month, from 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, 100,000 people, 1,000,000 people, suddenly you make a huge impact. But we always go back to the point that it's sacrificial giving that's leading our ministry and our efforts, that we have to give it to people who otherwise wouldn't have the ability to come to Israel. So my focus is more on the at-risk countries, which thank God America doesn't qualify at. But I think there's an awakening going on in America as well. I know a lot of people personally from America that exactly like you said, for the first time, the borders of Israel are closed. And that was a wake-up call for a lot of people that if you want to come to Israel, the only way is by making Aliyah and realizing, having the ability, I always say, having the ability to choose, whether it's with moving to Israel or so many hot topics today like vaccinations or anything like that. Having the ability to choose is a privilege.
I wasn't even asking about a subsidy for the Jews of the United States, more of an informational campaign. And I think that they are truly at risk today. The Jews, obviously, of France and Russia and the other places that you mentioned are definitely more so at risk, especially because they don't have the means to come here. But even in the UK and other places in Europe today, Jews are not welcome to or not comfortable walking around showing any sign of them being Jewish. And in the United States, I think that we're not far off from that. But again, that's just my radical opinion that I'm throwing in there.
So if I may, I was taught an amazing understanding of a verse by a shepherd from Bahrain who told me, and the lost ones will come from the land of Ashur, and the ones who are delayed or prevented will be coming from the land of Mitzrayim. The land of Ashur. Ashur also means wealthy, and Mitzrayim comes from the word Metzar, meaning troubles. So he said, if you're in a rich land, if you're in a land where you're being afflicted, like Egypt or Russia, the Soviet Union, or France, or the places that the fellowship works with, you're only delayed. Why? You want to get out there. You want to move, but you're being prevented. So you're only delayed because as soon as that gate is open, bang, you're out of there. But if you're in a wealthy land, you're lost. You're totally lost because you don't even know that you want to leave. You don't even feel what you're lacking. So in a way, the Jews in America are totally more lost than the Jews in Russia or Jews in places where they were even being prevented from being Jewish, because the Jews in America, they don't know what they're lacking. They don't feel
to strengthen what you're saying. The majority of Jews that have and Israel is a country of immigrants. The majority of immigrants that have come back home have come here running away from something because they were using this as a place of refuge. While the people that are not necessarily, they don't feel it yet, so they're not necessarily running away from anything. They're relatively content and comfortable where they are. Those are the ones that are maybe hardest to encourage to come home. So, again, I'm not sure that I'm going off topic here. I'm sorry.
So you do go to America to raise money, Yael. Do you also connect with Jews while you're over there?
So what's really amazing is that, like we were saying, within every dark situation, you can find that little bit of light. Within the 10 months now are we on of coronavirus. I haven't traveled. That's my shred of light.
Thank God.
Yeah. I normally travel once a month,
We
somewhere
like
else.
having you here.
Oh, well, thank you. I love being here. And so it's been amazing. And what's been amazing is that the fellowship in 2020 with coronavirus and with the first full year since my father passed, we had the strongest year we've ever had in the fellowship. Well, in the past, we were able to help the most amount of people that we've helped in a year has been 1.4 million people. And last year we helped 2.1 million people. And we have the highest amount of donors than we've ever had, which means more and more people are connecting to the mission and the legacy of my father, which is amazing. But I haven't traveled in a long time, which is just a blessing for me and my family, and being able to see that the fellowship can still stay strong and effective. But what we did see during the past year of 2020, especially with coronavirus, was more and more Jews joining the fellowship. That we have had over 36 leading philanthropists in the Jewish world give donations to the fellowship because we're able to implement these basic needs programs so quickly and so effectively. So while the Jewish world has been historically very focused, not as much on humanitarian basic needs, but on advancement of education, advancement of think tanks, advancement of scholarships, which is amazing. The fellowship never left our original vision of going back to our biblical roots: feed the hungry, clothe the naked, take care of the orphans and the widows. That's what we do. And so we've really perfected this model of being able to, on a notice, be able to distribute tens of thousands of food packages to the people who need it most. So what's been amazing is to see how the Jewish community actually has such an appreciation both for the fellowship's work and recognition for the Christians who have given sacrificially to keep our work alive and growing, that they've wanted to join it, which is just something awesome.
I think that goes back to the point where you said when you don't have a choice, sometimes it's like a slap in the face to wake you up to what you really, really, really wanted, what you were lacking.
Right.
So maybe in these times when we are so forcibly separated, people are thinking very hard about what they want to connect with.
Yeah.
And the fellowship is designed to connect people to Israel.
Right.
So they're probably turning to that. I think so. Josh, you had a question?
No, I would like Yael to detail a little bit more what the programs are, and what can people get involved in if they're interested in getting involved, and how do they get involved?
Okay,
I could see you chafing at the bit there.
So our main focus is really on basic needs. So we provide food across Israel to the most needy elderly and orphans, clothing for orphans, food for the elderly across Israel and the former Soviet Union. During the winter, we also provide heating aid that we're actually distributing now to 10,000 of Israel's poorest elderly in the coldest towns. And throughout the former Soviet Union, we have volunteers going and visiting with the elderly, bringing them medicine and food and winter heating. But in former Soviet Union, it's often in the way of bringing wood that was chopped of the trees, because the Holocaust survivors, while they used to go out and chop wood for the winter, they're now in their 90s. We could no longer do that. So really our aid changes in order to meet the needs of the people. One of the most important things is that we're on the ground. And that's why, for example, with the first closure of coronavirus, when nobody knew what to do and more than 10 people weren't allowed to get together, immediately, because we're on the ground in our relationship with the Israeli government, we were able to get the soldiers to transform army bases into food packaging locations and in order to distribute to the people who needed it. So in a time when Israel doesn't have a national food program, the government of Israel actually turned to us last year to distribute aid on their behalf, millions of shekels to people who needed food, because we had a better model of distribution to quickly get it to the people who needed it, even than the government. And we have such good reporting of everyone who gets it that we were able to do that for the government. So the main areas that
your organization does it yourself. You do that yourself, or you send it out to third parties you outsource that?
We do both. We have our own programs. We have a program called In Fellowship and Dignity, where we identified the poorest 15,000 elderly in Israel, and we set certain criteria that they have no family, that they're living on under $500 a month, that they're not getting any supplemental income, etc. And those 15,000 elderly, we actually approached them and said, we are going to bring you food for the rest of your life, because we know these elderly are not getting out of poverty. And so
you just blew my mind, Yael. Just to be able to say that to someone is huge. You just blew my mind.
So each one of them has a volunteer that every month goes and visits them and brings them the food that they need. And a lot of them also have specific dietary requirements. For example, if somebody has diabetes, they can't eat what's in a standard food box. So we actually let them choose exactly what they want, just like we order from the supermarket. And we have an emergency fund for when our volunteers go if they identify an additional need. For example, I just heard a story of an elderly that a volunteer went to visit her. Her bed broke. She was sleeping on the floor on a blanket. And so within 24 hours, they tapped into our Fellowship Emergency Needs Fund, and we bought her a brand new bed. So we both do it directly through our own programs and volunteers, as well as when we identify an organization or a ministry or people who are doing good things on the ground in an effective way, we'll be happy to give them the funds in order to get it to the people, but they'll carry it out.
So again, how do people contact you if they're interested in both on the side of they're interested in donating, as well as people that may need these subsidies? How would they be in contact, or if somebody wants to volunteer, how would they be in contact?
Great question. So you could go to www.ifcj.org. That's our main international America-based website, where you could find out about all different programs, make a donation, learn about what we're doing. And you can always follow me also on Facebook at Yael Eckstein on Facebook, where you can get more updates also about the ministry's program and also day-to-day life in Israel.
Well, I have to tell you, you really did just totally blow my mind.
I'm going to be hitting you up, Eliyahu, to be one of our volunteers.
Please, I'll be your Golan office. I have no problem with that, and I'll tell you why. I'm just picturing there are actually a very high percentage of Holocaust survivors, a lot of Holocaust survivors in Katsrin. A lot of them are Russian Holocaust survivors.
We have a lot of programs there.
Yeah. Oh, so maybe we know the same people, and I can I see them, and they, they're the ones who have the big bags of plastic bottles that they're taking to the supermarket to get money back on the bottles, and I can't even imagine what it must be like to have someone walk up to you and say, "You're being fed. You're going to be fed, taken care of. Don't worry about it for the rest of your life." It's mind-blowing. It's a person like that who really, they have nothing. They came to Israel. They're really, in this little dark apartment by themselves. And I'm not exaggerating. To have someone say that to you is mind-blowing. It's huge. Wow. Also, when you mentioned your Facebook page, I'd like to highly recommend it, and I'll tell you why. I'm connected to you on Facebook as well, and you do great videos. Your videos, you let it flow. It's all about prophecy, all about light and connecting to Hashem. It's huge. You mentioned that you're going to be starting a podcast soon. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So it's another way, basically, just to connect Jews and Christians in these shared values and teachings. I'm really excited about it. I actually already recorded 6 of the first episodes, and I'm so happy with them, and I love them. So we're launching February 14th, and it's called Nourish Your Biblical Roots, and we're launching actually with Charisma. But you'll be able to find the podcast both on the Charisma site as well as on any podcast site. It's called Nourish Your Biblical Roots.
Yeah, I've seen some of yours, and you're good at it. You really you give over great energy. I really appreciate it. So, Yael, I hate to cut this short. I've been interviewing you for years, and every time I speak with you, I learn something new. And today you blew my mind a couple of times. I appreciate it. I'd like to thank you for being with us. I'd like to thank our listeners. And just to remind you that if you bless us, we have no choice but to bless you back, because that's what's written, that God told us to do. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day, and stay in touch with Yael.